To be a good manager, it takes practice and time. So pretty much all managers suck to begin with. I had to have really strong conversations with people. I've had to fire a lot of people. I mean, you don't have to care about people to be a great leader, but it can help. What's important to you? The second question is, why is that important? But if they had that and everyone improved 1% a day and that compounded, what could the returns be like? When you have a goal, every moment you have that goal, you haven't achieved it. People don't like uncertainty. How can I adapt myself as a leader to impact the other people? I am responsible for their actions, is how I think about it. My gut feeling says that communication is just going to get worse.
The human connection is the key to personal and career success.
Every interaction we have is a drop in the ocean of someone's life that creates a ripple.
Sometimes we are afraid to do something. You fear shame. I don't want shame. We're trying to break that burden by sharing stories of courage, resilience, and we want to be able to celebrate your story.
Shameless.
Hello, Shameless family, and welcome today. My name is Dzika Gangaidzo, and I'm the host of the Shameless Podcast. And I'm so glad that you're back joining us on Friday as we look to have a meaningful conversation. And today we're joined with Dale Turnbull. Dale Turnbull. Pleasure having you.
Pleasure to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
And what we're going to be discussing today is communicating for impact as a leader, how to create alignment and team culture. And I'm so glad to have you today because I was actually looking up about 86% of employees blame company failures on poor communication. I mean, that's just one mind-blowing stat that I was just like, this has got to be either fake or we've got a real big problem. And I thought, well, what not better than to have Dale join us today and give us his insight around leadership, communication, and how the culture within a team is built around something, how leaders are able to communicate, and some of the weaknesses, myths, challenges that he's seen in the industry. And the reason why Dale is important, or why I am so honored to have him here, is because he's trained and coached over 700 professionals. He's got many different approaches towards getting this done. And Dale, maybe you could give a little bit of a snapshot of who you are, what you've done, before we dig right into it.
100%. So I've got over 12 years of experience working in the corporate space, primarily within learning and development. So, I mean, if you've struggled to manage people, try teaching people. It's a whole different ball game. And the industry that I focused on was recruitment. So essentially recruitment agencies. So essentially finding top talent for companies and finding companies for top talent. And ultimately, it's all about communication. Unlike a lot of industries where you're selling a product, by selling a service, by actually selling an individual. It sounds a bit weird when you say it that way. But ultimately, you're saying why this person is amazing for your company, and you're telling a person why this company will be amazing for them and their life. It can be really quite challenging. And over my 12 years, I've worked with multiple companies to help train their staff, upskill their staff. But throughout that time, I actually managed over 300 different people, and different people on a monthly basis. So having to deal with different personalities, some that will tear your hair out, some that will really frustrate you, and some that seem like a dream. Hold on. I've done a lot.
Oh, Dale, 300 people. Is that like at one moment you just had like 300 people on your doorstep? Or because I mean, just the idea of that is blowing my brain.
So it was a very intense 4-year period where I was managing about 30 different people, but each month it would be different. So because I was part of a training system, they would come in, I would train them on certain things, and then they'd move on to the next group of people to learn the different skills. So having to, and I work mainly with like graduates or my entry level people. So quote unquote unskilled, some were, but like people new to those sort of environments. And it can be a real challenge because you've got different people thinking in different ways, understanding different things. And it really opened my eyes to how challenging like being a manager is.
Yeah.
Because,
why? I mean, because
you like there's just a lot of people. I mean, I know that you've got a mining background, and I know one or two people who come from more of a manufacturing side of things. Yeah. One of the challenges for a manager, specifically in those environments, is you're amazing at your job. You're great at the process or the thing you're doing, but also you've got a relationship to everyone around you. You're part of the team. You're part of the crew, so to speak. And that was very true of recruitment as well. But when you get promoted to a manager, normally the person who gets promoted is very good at their job. They're very skilled, but they've got no idea of how to manage people. But not only that, when you become a manager, everyone looks at you differently.
Yeah.
Everyone sees you in a different light. So one, there's this new expectation from those above you. You got to do a certain thing. There's an expectation of those below you, which is also a bit weird and a bit different and a bit strange you got to work around. So it's a really weird dynamic. And also, to be a good manager, it takes practice and time. So pretty much all managers suck to begin with. That's how it is.
You know, that's a beautiful thought, because the idea that you have to practice, the idea that you have to really get into an understanding of not only yourself, but also this new environment, these new expectations, and managing that space. Are there any tips, any tools, any processes in which you can maybe give some advices to people who are maybe new at it, people who are in it and might be trying to find some, tools and tips to get better? What's your viewpoints on that?
100%. So, first thing is be kind to yourself, because you're going to make a lot of mistakes. Point one. Easier said than done. But the second thing is management has so many facets to it. There are so many things you could look at being a manager. And the first thing for you to become a better manager or a more empowering leader is to be aware of, well, where are you good? Where do you do your job well, effectively and efficiently? Where do you struggle? I'll give you an example. So working with recruitment, it's a sales environment. So there's a lot of high pressure, a lot of expectation to make certain sales, hit certain quotas by certain timeframes, hit certain KPIs. And when I was put into this position as a manager leading this team of new trainees, I had to have really strong conversations with people. I've had to fire a lot of people because management told me that the expectation wasn't met, and I was so uncomfortable with those situations. I was just like viscerally. It was like going.
I hate doing this.
It was like going through hell. Literally, that's what it was like for me.
Yeah,
and I was because I care about people. I mean, you don't have to care about people to be a great leader, but it can help. But because I cared so much about these people, right? I was so emotionally connected to them. So I had to learn to disconnect emotionally and just think logically, pragmatically in business. You know, you say like the cold people in business, like, no, there's a pro and a con to that, right? Because ultimately business decisions are made just through numbers most of the time. It's facts, statistics, return on investment. And that is a very important part of business. So notice where you struggle. And if you are very cold, if you're very numbers, I met a guy, really great guy. He's a very analytical guy, very process-driven guy. Your standard operating procedures, he loves them. Everyone knows that guy.
Yeah, we know that guy. We don't really like that guy. If I have to...
Really? No. But he's got a very important role because he's the one who's always right. Now... give or take, right? But he's following the rules. He's doing the stuff.
Yes.
If you want him as a health and safety guy, right?
Yes.
He's annoying, but it's very, very important as a role.
Yeah.
But the very good health and safety guy might struggle with interpersonal connections, having more of that social, because they're very different ways of thinking, from emotional to logical. So the first step is, okay, understand where is your problem? Like, where do you struggle? Is it having a monthly meeting, having a disciplinary meeting, having an inspirational meeting? You know, some people can get up there and do a speech to the world and really inspire and rally the troops, so to speak. They're all different skills. So the first thing is understand what context you struggle in the most. And the next is, okay, well, think about who does it differently and maybe start talking to them as a first point. Where can I get, like on this podcast, you have tons of different people coming on. Who can give me that information? Who can give me a different way of thinking in that situation that I'm not used to?
And so then that's very interesting, because now you're trying to understand yourself, and because that's essentially the first, what I've understood from the first pillar. But then aligning the team and building the culture.
100%.
How do you then take that? Because that's now an external
100%.
sort of, yeah.
So so first thing is understand where your strengths and weaknesses are. If you know that, you can start working on things. Now, if we want to align somebody to or align a team or align a business, well, let's think about it. How do we align our interests in small talk? We talk about the weather. Why? Because everybody knows about the weather. I hate that sort of small talk, but it's what can everybody talk about and get aligned with? Now, in business, or let's say mining company, recruitment company, there are big goals, big things that the big CEOs, the big investors, the big stakeholders care about, which guy with a pickaxe doesn't care about in the slightest. He's got no interest in that. So there's a really big disconnect. Now, the key for organizations that are inspiring to work for, or actually get people moving together, or even sub-departments or leaders, is they understand the goal. They understand where we're going, why we're going there. But then they also understand their team and their team's motivation. So there's a few really good ways to find out motivations for teams. So ask the people you work with, what's important to you? And it could be in work, what's important in your job. It could be what's important in life. What's important to you? The second question is, why is that important? Ultimately, we want to understand why we're emotionally invested. It could be, I want to do this job because I need to feed my family. That's pretty basic of the needs, right?
Yeah.
Some people, depending on context, is, well, I just really want to feel like, if I think about you're talking about you want to have this ripple effect. You want to impact the world.
Yeah.
So if I tell you, if you let me on your podcast, I will help you influence the world, you're going to be like, I want Dale on my podcast.
Yep, and that's why you hear it. In case you didn't know, that's why you hear it. It's just to impact the world.
Like if you want to go through the filtering system. No, but it's true. Now, the thing is, if you can then talk about, let's just say this person, I don't know, they want to feel like they're growing and developing themselves because they're happy when they're learning. Let's imagine that's what drives them. We then need to say, well, how does that, what they want, how does that fit into the team's goal, what the team are looking to achieve, or the department? So if you're working, I don't know, the processing side of a manufacturing site, if you do your job, if you learn this, if you implement this new process for the process people, if you implement this, you'll do a better job, which means you'll feel greater, which means the department will be more successful. You'll be able to learn new skills and you'll be able to grow. Which fits in turn with the company, because as the company grows, more sites will be needed, more progression opportunities will be available, which means you'll have the opportunity for growth. So it's really about understanding what motivates people. And normally we have two types of motivation. We have towards motivation, which is towards something pleasurable or getting away from pain. Yeah.
That's and in terms of which one are they equally as strong in terms of the pull? Would you say that the running towards something creates a more motivation or longer lasting motivation, or running away from something? I mean, you said towards and
away from. So here's a question for you. For you, have you ever specifically been threatened to be fired?
Yeah.
Cool. That does something.
That does. It does a hell of a lot.
Okay. So there's pros and cons, right? Now, we all have preferences. But to get away from pain is normally quicker. There's a lot more energy to it. So I was working with a guy, right authoritarian guy. Oh, do this, do that. He was telling people he was a nightmare. Anyway, but what he would do is he would lead by fear. He would lead by if you don't do this, this is the consequence. Don't do this, this is a consequence, which worked for about 2 months. And then people burnt out. They just fell apart. Like it wasn't sustainable. Ultimately, the people who are most successful in life know where they want to go, and they've got a very good vision of where they want to go, and they're proactively moving towards it. Now, that doesn't mean sometimes they don't need a kick from behind, to help them along a little bit.
Yeah.
So a balance of both can be useful. So, for example, if I'm using this person, so with the I want to feel like I'm growing, and that makes me happy. So we've got this new process which we need you to implement. And if you implement that, you'll get new growth opportunities so you can feel like you're growing and developing, and you'll feel happier. They'll be like, yay. And if you don't do it, there'll be penalties, which could actually be quite painful, because this is really important for the health and safety of things. So we're going to be very strict on this, and there'll be strong disciplinaries or whatever if this process is not fulfilled. So they've gotten away from and they've got towards. So if you're, let's say, presenting this to an organization or to a team, if you know what motivates your team, you can tell them all the good things that they stand to gain and all the pain that they might get if they don't. That's going to move everybody further forward.
Love that. Absolutely love that. And then I guess then that portion of having that thing to go towards, and at the same time having that repercussions in terms of accountability, then allows for really clear alignment of expectations and direction. That's one portion, I guess, of how you gain alignment and within a team.
Yeah.
Would you?
Well, I mean,
is that fair?
Well, let's think about it. Let's just imagine you and I. We were gonna. I don't know. I was visiting you, and you're like, "Let's go on a hike somewhere." We need to be standing side by side, or we need to at least be looking in the same direction. So we need to see. Okay, that's where we're going. Now, you might be in front of me, so you're leading the way. That's cool. I'm following you. No worries there. But we're both going the same way. We both know what we look forward to. We're both heading in that direction. So if we've got big company goal, this is where we're going. And then we've got departmental goals, which are aligned with the company goals. And we have individual goals. Then it all goes up the chain because, I know that my work today will help the department tomorrow, which will help the company in 6 months. That brings everybody into alignment. Now, the challenge is companies and businesses can promise things that don't happen.
They lie.
I mean, they could lie.
Yeah, fair enough.
I mean, some probably do, but stuff changes.
Yeah.
And one of the challenges we have in life is a lot of the time we're very transactional. I give you this, you give me that. Whereas business and entrepreneurship is a lot more shades of grey, so to speak. So, for example, in a consultancy I was working with, they were going to bring someone on and they decided not to in the end because they were looking at pipeline. And a woman got upset because she was like, I was looking to hire that person for my team. But she understood that it didn't fit with the business in that moment. So she could be really upset. She was potentially lied to or the expectations were mismanaged. But she was mature enough to see it in the full picture as opposed to, you didn't give me what I said. you know. And this is what we've got to do, because we want to be honest, we want to be upfront, but as soon as you start lying to people about what they're going to get, that's just not going to help you at all.
No. So, the idea of an individual goal and aligning to the team and that expectation that sometimes is created. The time horizons at time between an individual's self-gratification and, wanting to, get the pat on the back or anything that is associated towards that longer, larger goal that a company might have, which could be on a quarterly or annual basis. That difference in timing, how does one manage that? Because to get the company goal, you could wait a year, but as an individual, you might need shorter, more frequent bursts of support.
100%. Now, if you understand the needs and motivations of the people you're working with, for example, I could just say, I know we talked just before about the ripple effect you want to have. As soon as I mention the ripple effect you want to have, you feel it, and you're like, yeah. So it may sound really simple, but if we truly care about the needs, wants, and motivations of the people we work with the format I gave you earlier, we can use that to our advantage to be like, well, ultimately, so I want you to send me the recording after this, because then I can share it with my network to have that ripple effect in the world. Wow. And it can also be, okay, people's life and situations change. Let's say, God forbid, something bad happened, your priorities might change. Yeah. So as a manager and as leader, I need to be aware of those real life things. Okay, what do you need now? What's important to you? Why is that important? Tell me about it. Let me understand it. And then I can try and help with those things. Ultimately, we're like, if we do I know what they want once, thinking that won't change, these things change and morph over time as we grow and develop as people.
Yeah. And then how then do you, because we've talked a lot about the individual. Mm-hmm. Now, that individual is a function of a team, a collective.
Correct.
How then do we then marry different and diverse individuals with different diverse goals to then create that team culture?
Interesting question. So to create, I like to think about, I do a lot of work with metaphors. And an example is, let's imagine your team is, so think about what's your team like. If you're a manager or leader, consider what's your team or what's your business like. Now, if you're a ship, for example, it's like everybody's got to be on board. We've got to have a certain direction. There's one captain, normally, who picks the direction, and everyone's got their jobs to do. If everybody's comfortable with that, it's going to work well. So if you wanted to align a culture, I would get everybody together. Ideally, let's say I'm going slightly bigger. So let's imagine I've got 4 different teams. I've got the managers to find out what their teams want, so I know what each of the individuals want. I'd get them to give me an overview so I know what I can present to people, how I can get people motivated to the bigger picture. And then what I do is I do a bit of an exploration, because most people don't like being told what to do. So we go, okay, this is what we want to, so we're thinking this is a potential goal as a company. This is what we'd like to achieve, okay? How do you think we're going to get there? Let's do some activities. Get people involved in the activity of doing that. Okay, as a department there, we're looking to do efficiency. So forget what you're doing right now. Just imagine that didn't exist. How would you make it more efficient? Let's be creative with it. You can get people bought into that. Because if you're on a ship, whoever's in the engine room, the captain doesn't care about the efficiencies in the engine room. They just care that it runs smoothly, effectively, and things like that. And if it can go faster with a new bit and bob or an engine, the leader can then sell it upwards to say, look, if you gave us this, we get a lot more out of it. So how can you work as a team or department? Bearing in mind we want to contribute to that. So if you contribute a couple of percent, you contribute a couple of percent, will we get there? It's definitely achievable. So these things can compound. You used a great statistic at the beginning, and statistics and facts can be really useful in presenting these cases. Ultimately, if everybody in your organization improved 1% a day, they need to have awareness to do so and people to guide them to do that. But if they had that and everyone improved 1% a day and that compounded, what could the returns be like?
Yeah.
It can be quite
massive.
Exactly. And it's about presenting the possibility. Ultimately, goal setting is a very interesting one, because when you have a goal, every moment you have that goal, you haven't achieved it.
Yeah.
So there's a really awkward thing that you haven't achieved it. But also, if you set yourself a really big goal, there's a thing called a BHAG, a big, hairy, audacious goal. And I was working with this recruitment company. And when I was with them, I mean, we were growing quite consistently. And the owner's like, we're going to grow 100% in 1 year. And we're like, what? So that was like 80 extra sales staff, like doubling the number.
Wow.
With the turnaround, with the people leaving, like all of this sort of stuff. And the company broke in a lot of different ways. Like the learning and development, the function needed to be restructured because it was not sustainable with that level of growth. The talent acquisition team needed to be restructured because it couldn't handle. But we grew, I think we got to like 97% growth within that year.
Which is still impressive.
But it means when you aim for bigger things, you have bigger problems.
Yeah, fair enough. Yes.
But it was just a really interesting experience of how setting those goals, aspirations can do those sort of things.
But then also, I guess that's the thing with big goals. You can get people on board. And it's, it becomes aspirational and everyone's driving for this big, hairy thing that you go, if we can do this, you look for the momentum and then you start getting there. But then isn't there a flip side where if it's too big, then it also can terrify people away from,
100%. And this is where, as a manager or a leader, when you're having, let's say, a meeting like that or a presentation, one, you need to be certain it's possible. You need to believe it is possible, because certainty is a really big indicator of success. If you think it's happening, there's a lot higher chance people feel that and believe that. But also you need to show proofs and evidence that things can work. The company beforehand grew 30% year on year before we had this big increase. So there had been a record of potential success. If it hadn't grown at all, and it's like,
we're going to be here.
But then it's also subjective. Like we had let's say 80 sales staff. If you've got an organization of 5, growing 100% in staff is not huge. So it's really a perception based thing. But ultimately, you want to create belief that. And also, I talked on another podcast about people don't like uncertainty. So you can be certain about where you want to go, but also be certain about the problems you'll face.
Fair enough.
I saw a thing that in marketing, I know in the UK on like bus stops, they've got like little electronic signs that tell you how long to wait for the bus. And apparently that improves satisfaction of the people because they know it's coming. When you're just waiting at a bus stop and you have no idea when it's going to arrive, if it's going to arrive, how it's going to arrive, it creates a lot of challenge. So, for example, if you're like, look, this is the goal, you've all put your thing in place. Now there's going to be challenges. We're going to struggle to get these people. This needs to have a whole revamp, and there's a lot of challenges around that, which we've already started to look at. You're talking about all the issues. You're talking about the elephant in the room, so to speak, as you say in English. These are the problems we know we're going to face, and we're already starting to deal with them and look at them. That helps to work with that lack of security, because it's been thought through. It's not like, we're going to do this, guys, off we go.
And then surprise, boom.
It's like that. But no, the fact that the thought's gone in and just talking about the problems and that they're working to be solved can really help to inspire that certainty.
But then when you then have, and I want to try to really tease out that piece of communication, right? Because I've heard you say a lot of different things. And when you look then communication styles, there are a lot of people who might not actually be too comfortable, trying to be the big orator, massive speeches, and so different people have different styles. But does that mean that it's not possible to then be able to lead and communicate effectively within a team or towards a team if you are a bit more reserved?
I think it takes practice. Point one. So I've created something called the 7 positions of leadership, which looks at 7 different ways you can be a leader. They all have strengths, they all have weaknesses. So, for example, the stereotypical leader is normally leading from the front. They're picking the direction. They put themselves first. They're taking steps forward. They've got a clear direction. This is your business owner. This is your successful entrepreneur. Because ultimately, they're very good at going into the unknown and not being afraid, or being afraid and doing it anyway. And then you've got people following them. So they might get upset that they never put me first, but they're the people who go ahead. Now, a problem with that is they might get frustrated if their people are too slow, if they're not catching up, things like that. Yeah. Now, that's a great leader, and that's very stereotypical. I talked about the analytical guy. He's a very righteous leader, following the right processes, doing things in the right way. So there's pros and cons to that style of leadership. The opposite to that is like more of an options leader. Someone who's like, well, let's explore what are the options, what are the problems, how can we do things differently? Now, that can be very useful, but they don't normally like to make decisions. Let's just keep brainstorming. Let's get more and more options. Right? So there's different flexibility. But from a communication standpoint, I'll give you a few different things to consider. So the way I work with people, so I studied neurolinguistic programming, which is essentially ways of thinking about how we think as humans. And it's, understanding what are the different polarities in personality. So I mentioned you've got people who are very emotional, quite feeling people, and you've got people who are like quite thinking people. So if somebody is a little bit more analytical, if they're aware they're more analytical, they might be aware they might come across as colder to certain people. By being aware of that, they can start to adapt. The emotional person is normally a bit fluffier. I'm going to call it fluffier. So I had a guy. So what are your sales going to be this month? He's like, well, I've got a lot of great stuff coming in. It looks really good. Got a lot of stuff coming in with the company. So how much is coming in? Well, I mean, I had this great conversation. No, don't give me the fluff. Like, tell me the concrete data. And this is something I've struggled with a lot. It's not my preference in how I show up. I've learned in business to be better with numbers, but I prefer to be fluffier. It's like, what's the return on investment from your leadership training? What statistics and revenue will we generate? I mean, you guys will work a lot better together and you'll get more results. Yeah, it's more challenging. So those are 2 polarities to be aware of. You've also got people you've got introverted and extroverted, which you've probably heard about before. And now introverted people, they normally take a little bit longer to answer things. They normally think about it first. I love a podcast because you ask me a question, I'll talk. I'm more extroverted. Some of the gold I say without thinking about it is beautiful. But if you ask me to, Dale, sit down and think about some great things, I would struggle.
Nothing is coming. I can't think of anything.
Exactly. So extroverts work better in conversation. Introverts work better giving them some time to reflect and then having a conversation about it. Yeah. You've also got one last one, which is quite useful, is you've got people who are structured and intuitive. So like a little bit similar to the guy who likes to write. Some people love bullet points. Yeah. I like, give me a chalkboard or a whiteboard and just let me draw everything out. I want to get everything out of my head. So some people are more abstract and some people are more lists.
Yeah.
Now, sometimes lists are great because they're good for to-dos, things you've got to get done, but it's very structured, very rigid. So if there's stuff outside the box, you might miss it.
Can't compute.
Whereas if you brainstorm, you can get it all out and then you can structure it. So there are pros and cons to different approaches. So when you're working with somebody, if you've got an idea of their preference, you can think, okay, well, this is how you – so if somebody is quite structured, well, write a list for me. Write a list for me and come back if they're an introvert. Well, should we talk about the list you put together? Or if you were to list things, let's have a conversation about it. We can start to learn, okay, how does this person – there's a quote in neurolinguistic programming which sounds really obtuse, but essentially it's the communication that you put out are the results you get from people. So I had a guy – a really nice guy, tried really hard, as I say, a bit more of a process-driven guy. And he's like, I've told this person 10 times to do it this way, and he's not doing it. Now, what comes to me is, well, how are you telling him? Mm-hmm. One of the challenges I see, and I think this is why I'm so passionate about leadership development and coaching people, is I come from how can I adapt myself as a leader to impact the other people? If they don't do something, did I communicate it clearly enough? Did I give them space to express themselves? Did I motivate them enough to do the task? What was lacking in my delivery which stopped the task from getting done? Because then I'm actually empowered as a leader because I can make change. Otherwise, I can just blame them for doing it wrong, and then I've got no repercussion. So as So as much as they are fully responsible for their actions, I get that. But I'm responsible for their actions is how I think about it. Because then I can actively make change. And it forces me to think differently.
And so if you were to then say some key ways that somebody can practice. I mean, we talked about practice getting yourself into those spaces. How are there some things that you can give us some examples on how somebody might be able to just put themselves in those situations, or some tools that maybe they might not want to be out there practicing in front of the whole world? They want to do it in a slightly more safe environment.
Gotcha, cool. So I'll give you an interesting one. So when we watch movies or TV shows or even theatre, we associate to the characters. It feels like we get sucked in. It's like we're there sometimes. We're actually in the movie. And you've heard the expression like step into their shoes. Just step into their shoes. Now, that can be really quite weird to think about, but let's just imagine doing that for a moment. So let's imagine there's a certain skill that you struggle with. It could be anything. It could be being more assertive at work. It could be understanding somebody a bit more. It could be patience, whatever you like. Pick a tool that you struggle with and think about someone that you know does it well. Mm-hmm. So let's imagine I'm going to think about this guy who's really structured, because I'm not as structured. He's a big process guy. So let's imagine he's sitting down to write a process document. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to imagine in my mind what he looks like. I'm going to picture him. So where's his head? So his head's slightly up. His eyes are squinted. He's looking a bit serious. Not really much expression in his lower mouth. His shoulders are dropped. And he's just looking at a spreadsheet. That's what I picture, right? sounds happy, but anyway,
he does. But the point is, a fun guy.
But the point is, But the point is, I'm trying to gain a very imagine if accountants. Why are accountants not fun? Because their job involves detail, specificity, structured. So they might be fun outside of that context, but I get it. So where is the resource? The resource is he's got a good resource like that. So, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy his body language. So as I say, my head frowned, he's frowning a little bit, shoulders dropped. I'm literally going to physically move into his body shape as I imagine it. And then I'm going to almost like step into that seat that he's at. And I'm thinking now in a very different way. I'm also talking in a different way. Because it's almost like I've put on a costume of that person. What it does is we've got these things called mirror neurons, which is like we learn to walk. Like nobody teaches us. We see as babies and we copy and we start to get these movements. We can actually mirror someone's physiology because our physiology is also how we feel. If you're ever anxious, put your head up, look up and try and get anxious. It's very difficult. Try it. Give it a whirl. So think of something you're a little bit anxious about. Put your head all the way up and look up and try and get anxious about it.
I'm kind of feeling self-conscious because the camera's...
No worries. Cool. But ultimately, normally when people get anxious, they have a tendency to look down. They look down and they're a little bit like that. So there's... Our physiology and our bodies show our emotion. So if like they say, put your shoulders back and put your hands on your hips, right? Like do the Superman pose. Why does that work? It actually works. Stanford experiments show that if you just stand like Superman for like 2-3 minutes, your confidence boosts because you're changing your body to feel a certain way. So ultimately, if you can get your body into their zone of genius, what they're good at, if they're being assertive. Like, if they're being assertive, they're probably not like this close up at the person. No. If they're being assertive, they've got some physical distance and this is the way they use it. And if you start to, it will feel really weird and it will feel very not you. But for me, it's about how can I develop my flexibility because that gives me true freedom in any context as a manager or leader.
That's brilliant. That is actually, I mean, that... In order to practice, you have to know what you're trying to be, and then you have to embody that same energy, and if you've got an idea or vision of what that might look like, then it becomes possible. I mean, it becomes a lot easier. Maybe is the way to say it. 100%. And so, I am absolutely curious then, because I mean, we've talked about sort of the past, present. What does that future look like? I mean, we are in a world where there are a lot of things changing, a lot of moving parts, generational differences. How do you see from building teams, from having great communication, what are the things that you wish for that leaders start taking more interest in?
So... my gut feeling says that communication is just going to get worse. And the reason why I say that is because of the...
Wow.
And my reason for that is AI and technology. Yeah. We're becoming, obviously depending on your working environment, but we're becoming more and more technologically dependent. Life is so... I mean, think about it. Talking to a stranger or talking to a colleague is so much... less safe than what should I say on ChatGPT, you know?
Yeah.
And I think this is going to be potentially a real big struggle for people moving forward in organizations because everybody's focusing on optimizing systems, optimizing processes, all of these different things. But we're forgetting the people element. Like the people who actually do the jobs. No, there's nothing wrong with all the efficiencies, but are we looking at, okay, how do people interact? How do people connect? How can we make sure people are aligned and not just add in another process that's automated? And I think that's going to be the key for me, because if we've got all these tools that negate communication, when we actually do need to talk about things, will people have the skills to do that? I mean, even if you look at social media, like the personalities and personas people create for their social media that are totally different to who they are. It creates a lot of interesting conversations. So I think that's going to be an interesting observation moving forward.
Wow, and I do tend to agree because if you're not going to practice the art of communication and building up those muscles, like you sort of alluded to, then it becomes really, really difficult, or you just lose it. Really, I guess that's probably the way to say it. So I think I've really, really enjoyed this and this discussion, but what I'm actually going to have for the quote of this episode. So I was really scrambling and battling between two.
Cool.
The one that I was really thinking as one portion of it is communication. The human connection is the key to personal and career success. And I'm going to put that on the side.
Nice.
And it's essentially, and I'll explain why. But I also would like to have that drop in their ocean of someone's life. So having an impact by, sorry, you this was a quote that you said. So please,
okay.
Do let us go for it.
Every interaction we have is a drop in the ocean of someone's life that creates a ripple that expands outwards.
And the reason why, for me, that is incredible, because, I mean, you started by telling us around you were selling people to companies and companies to people. And that whole element of being able to connect those two to an individual singularity essentially means there's a ripple effect within the company and ripple effect within the person's life. And those journeys that you had as you were managing 300 people in sort of 10 chunks or 30 chunks, that it meant that you were able to deposit into somebody's life and then allow for them to continue on their journey. And though it was at the start of their journey, they were able to gain a large portion of knowledge. They were able to get a large imprint, and that then propelled them into a larger context and a larger space. And I think the thing that really touched me was, you start in a space, you're managing people, and over and beyond that, you firstly have to be kind to yourself. To be able to be kind to yourself allows for you to start to reflect, to look upon your skills, where you might lack, where the contexts are, what you might struggle with, and who might do it differently, so that you can talk to them and you can learn from them. You can actually build yourself. And as you build yourself, you then have this ability to understand your blind spots, whether that is not being too analytical and too robotic, and being able to have those tough logical discussions that are not necessarily yourself. But that in itself was some of the lessons that you're imposing into the different people that you sort of came across. And I find that that is a fundamental element of the start of anybody's journey, understanding yourself. Because if you're not able to understand yourself, you're not then able to lead others, teams, individuals, and companies. And so whether it is we're talking about the weather in the small talk, everyone talks about the weather. I hate it too. And but it is actually very easy, because that is the singular thing that everyone has to get involved in, right? Whether you like it or not, you're going to be rained on when it's raining, and you're probably not going to like it, because there's nobody around who goes, I love the rain, take me on. But the question then is about, where are we going? Why are we going there? And what is important to you, and why is it important? Because just like the weather, and just like a big, hairy, audacious goal, the company goals are usually the guiding tool. And the key for any leader within any level of the business is to be able to distill those company goals, team goals, individual goals, and understand the inspirations of an individual that can then roll up and align with the team and the company. And so in this discussion, you really teased out that idea of motivation of an individual on an individual basis. And that is that running away or running towards. And, when you talked about that, it was like, not recently, about a year ago, I resigned from a role. And the question that I was asked is, am I running away? Am I running towards? What was the thing that was motivating me? And the beauty about what you talked about is having that balance, because for any company, any team, any leader to be successful, there has to be a right level of balance to be able to say, this is the base and the consequences of your actions if you don't get there, but you have to first paint a hope. Give somebody a vision, give somebody a meaning and a reason, because at the end of the day, nobody wants a really hard-line transactional leader who governs by fear without giving you a direction of green light and a tunnel at the end of the light at the end of the tunnel. And so I find that extremely interesting, and it really shapes and talks to how you build teams, how you have that communication piece to give that vision for an individual and a team to then be able to find the motivation within them. Then when you bring multiple people to then say, we are now a collective, I think your analogy of a ship, everybody's got a role to play, and being able to explore and engage those different members then allows you to galvanize the individuals and their differences and to complement their differences to be able to get to a certain place. And so, and if each person gets 1% better, then, we are not only presenting the possibility of what's there and what is possible if we all did better and did more and we did our function, we know where we're trying to get to. It is also gives that opportunity to get that hairy, audacious goal, so that, you go and you're like 100% and that you guys had set out to improve on. And without that collective identity, then it really tends to struggle. And I love how you sort of teased in, people don't like uncertainty. And if you are able to understand and bring forward and talk to people about that uncertainty, the challenges that they may face, then you are able to collectively be ready for that and collectively then overcome that. Your 7 positions of leadership, that is so fascinating, because leading from the front, followers, and optional leaders, I think that is, for me, that gives a framework for the different types of people. And then now you can understand some of the polarities and awareness that you might need in order to be able to complement and understand how to lead others, how to be yourself, how to leverage your strengths and where your blind spots might be. And whether it's an introvert or an extrovert, whether it's structured or sort of more artistic, I think the key that is there is being able to stand like Superman, look up, and practice. And practice being that individual that is essentially your weak side or your blind spot. And the more we're able to practice, the more we're able to understand what we don't know, how we can do better, mimic those that do it better, the better that we are most likely to be. Now, I have talked a lot. I've tried to summarize a lot that we've talked about. And I guess for me, the whole essence of what we've talked about is a drop in somebody's life. If somebody is to pick up any one of these tools, this becomes a drop that can ripple out into a wonderful leadership experience, or wonderful journey, career path, and I even think in a personal basis that somebody might grow. And the reason why that quote that I talked about in terms of human connection talks to me so well about what we just talked about is that I think, and you mentioned it earlier, it's like there's an authenticity, a genuineness about wanting to understand people, wanting to understand and impact people. And as long as we're able to connect with people, we're able to understand people, we're able to understand ourselves, we give ourselves the grace, and we understand the humanity of it all, then we are able to then thrive and be successful in our own personal lives and career. And that is the one thing that I want to challenge every single one of the listeners, is that in this current modern age and day, I mean, you mentioned the future, what it looks like is that we might lose that ability to connect with people. We might lose that ability to communicate effectively, because now chat does everything for us. I don't really need to think. It's just type the prompt and it goes. And I would like to challenge people. Take some scenarios, take one scenario a week. And challenge yourself not to take the easy or the lazy way out. Revel in the detail, revel in the difficulty of not having technology do the heavy lifting. Challenge yourself in connecting with people and making that impact on a larger scale. Dale, it's been an absolute pleasure having you.
It's been a pleasure being here.
And I would like to then also offer you the chance to say something as a parting comment.
I just want to say it's been a real pleasure being here. And I think those of you who are still listening to the end, those that are still looking for that knowledge, that inspiration, you've got it. Just start taking steps.
And this has been a wonderful episode on the Shameless Podcast. Dale, really pleasure, real pleasure. I would like as well to make sure that your handle and your socials and every way that people are able to get a hold of you is in the bio below. But more so than that, if you can please also just let people know a little bit about your company and where they can find you.
Yeah, so you can find me at leadadaptimpact.com, or you can find me on LinkedIn. Reach out. So I help companies, teams, and individuals to better their leadership through enhancing their communication. Ultimately, it's how can you be better? How can you do better so that you can create empowered teams and, successful business?
Absolute pleasure. And I'm sure we'll be in touch. Thank you.
Thank you.
This podcast is brought to you by Transformation Leader. You can follow us at www.t4leader.com.